I'm doing this video to explain the great lengths that King Anu of the Anunnaki has taken to suppress the sovereign integral state of consciousness. It will blow your mind. This is a Project Camelot interview of James, the creator of the Wingmakers material at wingmakers.com. He wrote an ebook named The Ancient Arrow Project, and these are just the first two questions of the interview I'm doing, and you'll understand the great lengths that have been taken. And let's just start right now. Question 1 from Project Camelot: how much of the Wingmaker story is true or based on fact? Answer 1 from James: the terrestrial storyline is based on a technique called sensory bilocation, which is similar to remote viewing in concept. The storyline is based on my investigations using this technique as it pertains to the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization, Incunabula, Illuminati, ET cover-ups, etc. These elements were then modified in name, identity, and locations in order to integrate with the mythological storyline of the Wingmakers and retain the cloak that surrounds these organizations. It was not my purpose to expose these organizations or their dubious agendas. However, I was aware that many of the conspiratorial-minded were among those who cared the most about truth and uncovering it. The cosmological scope of the storyline is mythological, while the more terrestrial elements contained in the Neruda interviews are more based on my experiences with sensory bilocation. Question 2 from Project Camelot: some people studying and commenting on current events seem preoccupied with what are perceived by some to be discouraging messages of gloom or warnings of potential major problems. Others focus on messages of hope and light and refuse to dwell on bad news. Although we have no trouble incorporating both views and understand that how they manifest will depend on each of us, some of our audience tend toward one view or the other. What is your own philosophy or that of those you represent about this dilemma, and what light can you shed on this ongoing debate between the two factions, both of whom care deeply about the future of our world? Answer 2 from James: the ominous situations of our world are very real. It's impossible to look at the policies of governments around the world and see coherence, benevolence, enlightened action, or in general behavioral intelligence as an outflow of equality and oneness. The human family's been bound up over thousands of generations, and each time returning to our home planet for the sake of upgrading the previous generation's dominion, creature comforts, lifestyle, and technology, while the emotional maturity remains burrowed in the substrate of rape, abuse, enslavement, war, dishonesty, greed, government fraud, and 100 other vices of weak and disillusioned humans, programmed to only see the outpicturing of the human mind and its systems of limitation. The human family is building a pyramid of manifested life across thousands of generations, and each new generation builds another layer, an upgrade of technology and lifestyle. We are nearing the apex of this pyramid where there's nothing left to add. The pyramid's completed, and we, each of us, must look at the pyramid we have constructed and ask ourselves how it exemplifies our transcendence, our true self. The pyramid of humanity is manifest in a three-dimensional world, but it derives from a set of constructs that are flawed. What are these constructs? What makes them flawed? How did humanity get off course to build structures of civilization and society that are such poor reflections of who we really are? There's a specific framework that has emerged over millions of years to induce humanity to the repetitive post of deficient civilization builders. In the context of your questions, I must begin by defining this framework in order to answer all your questions with sufficient detail and bring some new texture and dimension to the conversation. This framework is known with lyricists as the suppression of the sovereign integral. Its 9 primary components are delineated below. Before you, the reader, continue on, let me warn you that this is a sobering and direct analysis of the suppression framework, and I would advise everyone who reads this to remain neutral as they examine my answers. If you find the information feeling too heavy or evoking fear, set it aside or return to it later. The story is not for everyone. Someone will feel threatened by it and react with a sense of alarm, and others will feel like someone pulled the rug from underneath them. If you feel any of this, you may not be prepared to confront these realities. Okay. The secret framework for the suppression of the sovereign integral. The human mind system. The human mind system is separated into three primary functional mechanisms: the unconscious or genetic mind, the subconscious, and the conscious. These three components intermingle to form what most people term consciousness. The human mind system is the most opaque and distorted veil that has stood between humanity and its true self, perverting its self-expression within the domains we call reality. The unconscious genetic mind is a repository of all humanity. The subconscious is a repository of the family bloodlines, and the conscious mind is a repository of the individual. However, and this is important to understand, the foundational patterns of thought are primarily from the subconscious and genetic mind structures of consciousness. Thus, while the individual believes themselves to be individual, unique, separate, and one of a kind, in reality they are not in the context of the human mind system. You can conceptualize yourself as a copy of the human family, folded inside a copy of your parents and bloodlines, placed into an individualized expression, you. The you is a human mind system particularized into one expression, but its roots are entirely planted in the soil of humanity and parental lineage, all of which is downloaded into the developing fetus before birth. This is precisely why after 10,000 generations we continue to operate in the same patterns of greed, separation, and self-destruction. The image in the mirror is upgraded with other clothing and sophisticated masks, but underneath the image remains the same feelings, the same thoughts, the same behaviors. Social and cultural engineering via the entertainment and educational systems conspire to entrain the individual during their developmental years, 3 to 14 years old, activating the programs and subsystems of the human mind system to ensure the individual is properly prepared to conform to the reality matrix of their time and place. Even those who are nonconformists, who fancy themselves outside the box, are well within the parameter of the human mind system. The next component of the 9 is called the money power grid. The reason for the human mind system to exist is for the elite to exercise control over the money power grid. Money is the prime objective of the elite because it imbues power to those who possess it. Money takes many forms, including assets of precious metals and petroleum, land or real estate, minerals and products and services. Money is the god of the elite and their banks are the religious institutions in which they can worship their god. The corporate elite, government elite, underground elite, and banking elite constitute the money power grid controllers. Those in positions of power, especially within the banking sector, are beholden to the money power grid and will do everything possible to tighten their controls of the money power grid and manipulate the human family to serve their agenda. The next definition is the interdimensional universe structure. This is a structure of reality domains and how they interface with one another. Interdimensional universe structure is a very, very complex subject to disclose in a format such as this, so I'll only touch the surface. Human beings are both dimensional and interdimensional. First source is all of us. It is the collective us. It's not a God living in some distant pocket of the universe. First source is the human collective unencumbered with the human mind system. First source divided itself into individualized expressions, us. In the beginning, we inhabited dimensions that were not material, but existed at quantum levels of time and space. However, as the dimensions grew in density through the expansion of creation, our creation, we as individualized interdimensional beings were seduced into the human body. This seduction was a co-conspiracy of forces led by Anu, the king of the Anunnaki, who required enslaved workers to mine the physical gold that was present on Earth in abundance. Those beings we now consider the Atlanteans were interdimensional, living upon Earth, and Anu, with great cunning, convinced them to embody inhuman instruments. This embodiment was a grand experiment in human engineering, and the human mind system was at the core of this project. Anu realized that the only way to enslave the Atlanteans was to sheath them in a mind system that would reduce their capacity to express their true nature and instead express the programs embedded within the human mind system. These programs were the creation of Anu and his scientists. The next definition is the God-Spirit-Soul complex. This is the central element of the human mind system that anchors separation. The individualized human being, free of the human mind system, is called the sovereign integral in the Wingmaker's mythology. This is the true identity of each and every human being. In this model of the sovereign integral, we are gods of our local multiverse, and collectively we are first source in the multiverse. Why is the spirit God-soul complex the anchor of separation? We have two paths, religion and spirituality, each being different sides of the same coin, and this coin is the God-Spirit-Soul complex. Now, Anu, being the intelligent, clever entity that he is, knew that humans would evolve, and in this evolution they may begin to remember that they are sovereign integrals. Bear in mind that the Atlanteans were highly evolved beings before they donned the human instrument of Anu's creation. Also remember that the human instrument is not simply the physical body, but includes the emotions and the human mind system, and that this human instrument is componentized so that while the physical body dies, a higher dimensional body or sheath that is based on the physical body carries on. Some refer to this as the soul, others refer to it as the astral body, but it is simply a sheath for the sovereign integral to operate within, and it remains subject to the human mind system and most of its programming. Thus, even upon death, the sovereign integral is not released from the influences of the human mind system or the human instrument's programs. The Anunnaki created the human mind system in order to consign the sovereign integral, the true self that is infinite and eternal, into a prison of conjured illusions and deceptions. So the human instrument was fitted with the human mind system, and the sovereign integral was placed within it as the life force, that which powered the human instrument. An aspect of the God-Spirit-Soul complex was the program we call the fear of death, the fear of separation, the fear of non-existence. It was this fear so powerfully felt by humans that gave rise to the construct of a separate God from which a separate spirit filled the universe and from which we were all created in separation. Whether one arrives to God through religion or spirituality does not matter. It's the same effect of appeasing the fear of death within the individual, just as the program specified. In effect, Anu, the king of the Anunnaki, positioned himself to be God of the human world. The pathway to God, independent of the religion or spiritual path one walked, had the same program underlying it. You are human with a soul. The soul must be redeemed or activated, upon which you will be saved. In this process of being saved, you're relinquished of self-responsibility to the world condition. You're rewarded with a life eternal in the kingdom of God, by whatever name you call God, where you can live in bliss and or serve as a teacher of the light. The Savior/Master construct is an integral part of the God-Spirit-Soul complex and encourages human beings to yearn for a master to teach them how to ascend or how to be saved, how to achieve nirvana, how to live a moral life, and how to ensure eternal happiness. There are masters of great wisdom and light who remain within the domain of the human mind system without knowing their involvement. The subtlety is so powerful that even when you feel you have achieved self-realization, you remain trapped in the human mind system. It is that vast, especially when compared to the material world. Saviors can take on the form of many things, including the second coming of Christ, the wrathful God, the earth, nature, spirits, angelic hosts, prophecy, and extraterrestrial forces who will intercede on humanity's behalf. Each of us is our own and only Savior, our only master who can truly cause us to stand up within ourselves and shut down the suppression systems and awaken to their sovereign integral consciousness. This is the liberation path, and this will be discussed in answers that follow. In essence, the God-Spirit-Soul complex is an aspect of the human mind system that perpetuates separation. Just as different languages separate different religious and spiritual pathways, separate the human family and make possible a race that's more easily controlled and pacified through the God-Spirit-Soul complex. The next definition is the Death Stress Implant Network Detour. As its long title suggests, it is the descent into humanness and the tether of custody to the material world. Within the solar plexus region of the human instrument is the Death Stress Implant Network Detour module of the human mind system. This gets a little complicated because you have to look at the human mind system as the master network, and then there are nodes or implants that plug into it. One of these is the Death Stress Implant Network Detour, and while it is anchored in the solar plexus and it is an intricate network that develops exponentially upward into the heart, neck, and head regions. This is an etheric structure that collects, absorbs, and distributes fear, anxiety, stress, and restlessness. While the fear of the future dominates this module, from a programming perspective, Anu was careful to connect it to the primal fear of death and non-existence. Death Stress Implant Network Detour creates much of the dysfunction in the human family in terms of its behavioral deficiencies. It also activates humans for service in religion and spirituality paths. Okay, the next definition is polarity system. This is a subnode of the Death Stress Implant Network Detour designed to create polarities in the human mind system and thus create friction between the polarities, and from this friction manifest discord and disharmony. If you exist in human mind system, and you do, then you exist in polarity. It is truly that simple. Polarity is what activates and feeds the human mind system. It's the food of the human mind system, because in polarity, the human instrument is lost in separation, which is precisely the point of the human mind system as intended by its designers. The next definition is the genetic manipulation system. This system was an outgrowth of various interdimensional races working together to create a suitable instrument for accessing the physical world. It was Anu who specifically wanted not only access the physical world in order to exploit its resources, but to do so by suppressing the infinite beings that would power the human instruments, so he had the equivalent of willing slaves. Yes, infinite beings can be suppressed into finite beings when they're subjected to the human mind system. In the course of engineering the human instrument, it was decided to create the genetic manipulation system as a means to modify the human instrument over time as it evolved, to ensure it would never achieve self-realization of the sovereign integral state of awareness. The state of Satori, Nirvana, cosmic consciousness, enlightenment, and rapture were all different names for heightened states within the God-Spirit-Soul complex, which was still within the human mind system domain, but these became checkpoints that triggered genetic manipulation system interventions. The true state of the sovereign integral, even after death of the human instrument, was never realized by a member of the human family until very recently. The next definition is the wholeness navigator. This is the element of the human mind system that activates the individual's authentic search for God in the context of wholeness, oneness, unity, and equality. Some people undertake this search because they feel an obligation to do this as a means to appease the expectations of their parent, spouse, or their own sense of guilt. The authentic search, as decreed by the Wholeness Navigator, which is an open-end system, is a recent bypass that has been brought into the human instrument through the genetic manipulation system, which is an open system. While it is still an artifact of the human mind system, it is a back door into the liberation path. More about this later. The next definition is the post-death system. This is the system where the individual upon death of their physical body is greeted by guides on the other side and review their life experience, confronting those areas of deficiency and returning to right the wrongs of their previous life, in other words, karma and reincarnation. The post-death system is the means by which the sovereign integral remains in the grip of illusion, even though the illusion is a heightened reality when compared to physical existence on the earth plane. It enables the recycling of the sovereign integral into physical dimensions over and over again. The process was initially conceived of as the principal means through which the world would be prepared for Anu to be born into the earth plane and reign upon earth as the undisputed world leader. However, that eventuality has been removed as a scenario. These 9 components constitute the prison complex that every human being is subjected to when they're born, live, and die, no matter how many cycles of birth and death they may undergo. With the suppression of the sovereign integral, we are all living in a matrix-like world of illusion and deception. While human beings are no longer in service to the Anunnaki for the production of gold, the genetic carryover of the human mind system, and the other components of the suppression framework are nonetheless still in operation, and the reins of these suppression systems have been turned over to and greedily grabbed by the elite. It is well past the hour that humans wake up to what they are participating in and learn how they can stop it, one individual at a time. We are the key to our dilemma, and we must learn how to deactivate the suppression matrix so we can awaken to the sovereign integral consciousness, live within its behavioral intelligence, and release ourselves from the grip of the mind and human instrument. Those who extol hope and light, I can only say that you will be disappointed if your hope is contingent on anyone. Save yourself to facilitate change in this world. It's truly as Gandhi explained, we must become the change we want to see in the world. But the key is to define what change. Have you ever considered the definition of yourself? What is it that defines you? If you look in the mirror and peel away the masks, the pretensions, the deceptions, the fears, the thoughts, the feelings, what remains? For most, they would answer their soul or spirit. And if I told you that the soul, as most define it, does not truly exist apart from the mind, what would you say? The change I want to see in the world is that people begin to see themselves as multidimensional beings whose core is the sovereign integral that is the distillation of first source and a singular human expression. If people were only in tune with this frequency, they would understand that all is united in oneness, equality, and truth. This is the definition of the grand portal as it was disclosed by the Wingmakers mythology for the past 10 years. Each individual is a portal unto themselves, and this portal is the access point to the interdimensional worlds of the sovereign integral, where the human instrument, like a spacesuit, is finally removed and the individual realizes their true infinite nature. And in this realization, understands that everyone is equal in the state. And in this equality, we are one. The grand portal is when humanity stands up as one being to this all-encompassing realization, and then we transcend the suppression framework and express as sovereigns. 2012 is a single book and is a single page in the book called The Era of Transparency and Expansion. The life of deception, the era of veils over veils is dissipating. Provided enough people rise up within themselves and honor the sovereign integral within by expressing its truth. But to do this, people must become attuned to its consciousness apart from the human mind system. And this is the course of action that people must engage in. The seeking of information is over. The seeking of a master guru, religion, spiritual path, a way shower is over. The seeking of objects of blame is over. The seeking of hidden information behind the dark forces is over. It is the expression of the sovereign integral consciousness and the activation of the suppression framework that becomes the focus of each individual in this era.